Hi everyone, and welcome to this week's Crime and Punishment story. Before we begin, can I just say, if you enjoyed this story, please do give it a thumbs up and please do subscribe to the channel if you'd like to hear more stories like this one or stories about the history of the Northeast, and please feel free to share this video if you think others would enjoy it too. One small part of this story is a little strange. I would love to know your thoughts, but we'll come to that at the end. Samuel George Emery was found guilty of the murder of Mary Ann Marshall, which happened in Tynemouth in July of 1894. Mary Ann was his girlfriend, and it seems his jealousy over unfounded rumours caused this romance to end in tragedy. This is his story. Samuel George Emery was born in Staffordshire in around 1874 to parents William and Betsy Ann. He had at least 6 known brothers and sisters, and his mother, Betsy Ann, had died in around June of 1881. His father, William, does not appear to have remarried, and he was a tile cutter according to the 1891 census, and Samuel was listed as having the same occupation. However, sometime later in 1891, he enlisted in the South Staffordshire Regiment when he was around 18 years old, and was sent to Tynemouth. Mary Ann Marshall was born in about 1876 in Newcastle upon Tyne to parents Robert and Barbara. Robert later married a lady by the name of Mary after Barbara died. Mary Ann had one known brother, and her father was an engine fitter, though it was later stated that he had also been an army man at some point in time. Mary was often known as Polly to her family and friends, but for the purpose of this story I will call her Mary Ann. In 1894, Mary Ann still lived at home with her parents in Cross Street in Tynemouth, and she is said to have a job as a maid. Her favourite place to spend her free time was at Holy Saviour's Church near the Broadway in Tynemouth. It was not the church she loved as such, but more that the church was a popular meeting place for courting couples, and it was here that Mary Ann had met Samuel Emery. They very quickly became a couple, and everything was happy between them. It is even said in some reports that they were engaged, and that had at one point attempted to marry, but Mary Ann was underage, and so Samuel had asked her father for permission to marry. He had refused. He later stated that this was not because he disliked Samuel, but because he felt he was not yet able to support a wife. The couple, however, remained together, and it can only be assumed that they were happy to wait until Mary Ann was a little older and able to marry without permission. On the wall surrounding the Holy Saviour's Church, a carving can still be seen today. This is a simple MM and a heart, which you can see on the screen at the moment. The MM is for Mary Marshall, and the heart is said to indicate the love she had for her sweetheart Samuel. But sadly, their happiness was not to last, as Samuel was posted to a location near York in the springtime of 1894, leaving them separated for long periods of time. Of course, Mary Ann promised to be faithful to Samuel, and the couple wrote to each other on a regular basis. Their letters always talked of how much they loved each other. All seemed to be fine at first, but then Samuel began to receive anonymous letters telling him that Mary Ann was seeing other men while he was not with her. This prompted Samuel to write more frequently, again telling Mary Ann how much he loved her, but in one letter he also told her, "You had better keep yourself to yourself, because I will come to you when you least expect me." He also suggested to her that he had a friend in the area who was keeping a close eye on her. Of course, Mary Ann did not understand why he was saying this, and I have not found any evidence to suggest that she was seeing other men, so she no doubt could not see why Samuel was so concerned about what she was doing when he wasn't there. As is often the case with information from such a long time ago, it can be a little confusing and conflicting, and this next part is just that. Some articles state that Samuel left the York area without permission and travelled to Tynemouth, using the barracks as a place to sleep. However, other articles state he left without permission, but I think the first part is true, and the permission he lacked was to leave Tynemouth barracks in civilian clothes, which we will come to later. It was said that he travelled and arrived at Tynemouth on July the 21st, and although it was night time, he still went to see Mary Ann. She was no doubt surprised but pleased to see him. He visited again on the Sunday evening, and the couple went out for a walk to Holy Saviour's Church. It was stated that they seemed to be on very good terms. It was claimed that no arguments or even a crossword had passed between them, and it seemed that all was fine. However, this did not truly seem to be the case for Samuel. By Monday morning, it was said that he was acting somewhat strangely. He wished to leave the barracks in civilian clothes, but was told he could not do this. So he took the clothes that he had and threw them from a window to the outside of the barracks into some bushes. He then left in his uniform, heading straight to the bushes where he changed into the civilian clothes that it was later stated he had actually stolen. For whatever reason, he decided it was not wise to be seen in these stolen clothes, so he went to a second-hand clothes store where he swapped them for a cheap suit, and he was also given £0.50 as the clothes that he left were worth more than those that he took in their place. He then purchased a knife in Savile Street in North Shields, and in a somewhat sinister move, he asked the shop owner to make sure that the knife was nice and sharp. Next, he wrote a note to Mary Ann asking her to meet him that night at the same place that they had been the night before, Holy Saviour's Church. This letter was delivered later that day. Back then, letters were very different to how they are today. You could write to someone in the morning asking them to tea that night, and they would get it in time to attend. Letters were used in very much the same way as we now use phones and text. But of course, there was not such a huge volume of mail being sent then, and a lot of the letters were local area post only. It would seem that Mary Ann's father was not keen on the idea of her going to meet Samuel that night, but she was determined to go. It was never really explained why her father did not want her to go. Was he concerned that something bad would happen? At around 7:45, the couple were walking near to the church. It was said that it was then that Samuel told Mary Ann that he was going to leave her for good. This upset her greatly, and she said to have flung her arms round his neck, begging him not to leave her, and this is when he picked his moment and stabbed her in the neck, not once, but twice. She screamed and tried to fight off his attack, but to no avail, and after leaving her for dead, he fled from the scene. It was claimed that some people gave chase, but he was able to evade them, having threatened them with the same knife, causing most of them to give up the chase and let him go. The body of Mary Ann was taken inside the church, and this is where she was when the police and the doctor arrived some short time later. It was said that she died some 5 minutes after the attack had taken place. Mary Ann would have been around 17 years old at the time of her death. Some reports say that Samuel hid near the railway lines until it was dark. Whether this is true or not, almost all reports say that he was later to be found in the Crescent Tavern public house in North Shields. It was here that he was said to be talking about the now widely known murder with those in the pub, and that he also wrote a confession note while he was here. Samuel was arrested by Inspector Mackenzie close to the pub. He confessed to the stabbing of Mary Ann and asked if she was dead. He was told that yes, she was, to which he replied, "Thank God." He then asked to see her. He was told that he could see her the next day, to which he replied, "I would really like to see her dead." Whether he was actually allowed to see her after saying this is unclear. He gave no explanation as to why he had committed the crime. He did not mention the anonymous letters at the time of his arrest, and Samuel was then taken to Newcastle Prison to await the inquest and the trial. At the inquest, which was held some short time after the murder, crowds had gathered outside, and on his arrival, Samuel had raised his cap to them all, which was seen as a little odd behaviour to many of the onlookers who had not seen anything like that happen before. The cause of death for Mary Ann was said to be knife wounds to the neck and extreme loss of blood. One witness claimed to have seen the couple on the fateful night. She claimed to have seen Samuel strike or stab Mary Ann at least twice, but she thought possibly also a third time. She has also said that she had seen the knife in his hand when he turned to leave. Samuel spoke of writing his confession note whilst in the public house before his arrest. He said he had given it to the landlady and told her not to open it until he had been gone for at least 5 minutes. The jury at the inquest very quickly returned a verdict of guilty of willful murder against Samuel Emery, and he was committed for trial. The funeral of Mary Ann Marshall took place at Preston Cemetery in North Shields a short time after her death. The hearse left her home in Cross Street with one mourning coach following, containing her parents and several other family members. It was said to have actually passed Holy Saviour's Church, where she had been killed. The route to the cemetery was lined by hundreds of locals wishing to pay their respects to the poor young girl. It was a very distressing day. Her father was said to have looked at the coffin and just said, "Oh, my dear Polly." He is later said to have angrily stated that should Samuel escape the law, he would see to him himself. The photo that you can see on screen at the moment is the nearest location I can get to the grave of Mary Ann. Although there is no headstone, it is known to be roughly in this area. The trial in October of 1894 contains very much the same details that I have already discussed. There is not a great deal more to add. The reasons for committing the crime was still not mentioned. It seems the stories of the anonymous letters really did not come to light until some time later, and Samuel had stated that he would not give a reason for his crime. The prosecution said it was clear that Samuel had planned the deed, arranging clothes so that he would not be spotted in uniform, buying the knife and arranging to meet away from Mary Ann's home. There could be no claims of insanity or a moment of sudden madness. It was indeed all planned. The defence claimed it was clear that Samuel and Mary Ann had indeed loved each other, and that jealousy had somehow eaten away at Samuel until he could take no more and had simply lost his mind, a crime of passion. The jury were asked to view Samuel with a degree of sympathy and to show him mercy. The jury retired for only 7 minutes when they returned a verdict of guilty of willful murder. The judge asked Samuel if he had anything to say as to why sentence should not be passed, to which he replied, "No, sir." With this, the judge then sentenced Samuel Emery to death by hanging, and that afterwards his remains would be buried within the walls of Newcastle Prison. In response to this, Samuel is said to have picked up his cap, smiled, and walked from the dock. The execution date was set for December the 11th, 1894. Due to his age, he was only around 20 years old at the time. A petition to commute the sentence to a prison term was started almost immediately. This was unsuccessful, and the Home Secretary very quickly refused to commute the sentence. It is not clear if Samuel was visited by any of his family in the days leading up to his execution, as I have not been able to find any details of this. It is to be hoped that they did, as they would surely have wanted to see their son, brother, one last time, no matter his crime. It is said, however, that he was visited twice a day by the prison chaplain, the Reverend Mr. Turnley, and that he had also attended chapel with the other prisoners. He was said to have been quiet and docile, spending his time reading and smoking. It was also stated that he had written to Mary Ann's father to ask his forgiveness for the crime. However, it was not stated what was said in this letter or if Mr. Marshall had actually replied. The execution took place in private, with no press being allowed to attend. There was only the word of the prison warders after the event to describe the scene. It was said that the night before the execution, Samuel was restless and did not sleep well. At 6 a.m. he dressed and spoke with the chaplain, where he was keen to confess his crime, and expressed great regret. It was also said that he seemed to long for his own death. The executioner, Mr. Billington, pinioned Samuel, which means his arms were tied at the wrists, and he was said to explain later that Samuel appeared somehow pleased to see him, and that he had never dealt with a prisoner quite like that. Samuel walked firmly to the scaffold. He did not stumble or falter, and he even raised his own head for the rope to be adjusted. It is said that he died immediately at the stroke of 8 a.m. After the usual length of time, bodies were normally left for 1 hour. His body was removed and taken for burial within the prison grounds. Samuel had paid the ultimate price for the killing of the girl he claimed to love so very much, due to his uncontrollable jealousy. You may have heard me mention the felon's plot before. This was a secret area for a mass grave in All Saints Church in Newcastle Cemetery, which was used to rebury those prisoners whose bodies were removed from Newcastle Prison when it was demolished in 1925. Samuel Emery was to be one of those reburied in the plot, but he was one of the 4 bodies that was never found. Not even his coffin was found, and this was after digging down to a depth of around 11 feet. What happened to his body is not known. There is one other strange tale connected to this case that I feel I need to add. This concerns Mary Ann's father. It would seem that he wrote to the newspapers to express his gratitude to the Pearl Life Insurance, who had paid him on the death of his daughter. The copy of the letter that I have seen is not very clear, but I have tried to transcribe it as best I can. He stated that this insurance had not been taken out until the day of her death, and that he had not paid 1 penny into it, but that they had paid him in full, which he felt deserved recognition. He did not state how much the insurance was for. It certainly seemed strange to me that he should suddenly wish to insure his daughter just before she was killed, but perhaps this is just my suspicious nature. It made me wonder if he had known something bad was about to happen after Samuel had returned to visit. After all, the identity of the person who wrote the anonymous letters was never revealed. So did he feel Samuel would attack Mary because of those letters? I would love to know what you think about this. I hope you have enjoyed this very sad and tragic story. Please do let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you have enjoyed it, please do give it a thumbs up, and do please subscribe to the channel if you would like to hear more stories like this one. Thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you all again very soon.